Hey guys, Tom here again from synthhacker.com. Welcome back to another tutorial for Serum. I'm going to turn you into a trap lord today. We're going to be looking at kind of like a getter style lead with Serum and how to like sequence really cool sounds and make it kind of like your own like unique squelchy like trap leads. Really fun. These sounds are really fun to make. The sound I'm going to demonstrate right now is just going to be one note held down, and you'll listen to like kind of how much modulation is going on and all that good stuff. So yeah, I'll demonstrate the sound and then we'll start kind of making it from scratch. So a really cool sound. This was a lot of fun to make. Like I said, it's kind of like that getter style, like the OWSLA kind of stuff. Really just kind of bouncy, like squelchy cool trap lead. Hopefully you like that sound. And yeah, there's quite a lot going on. So I'm going to try get through it fairly quickly. While still kind of explaining, kind of how you can learn from this and kind of make your own unique sounds rather than just copy this and use it exactly. And kind of different ways you can experiment and some tips and tricks and all that good stuff. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and initialize the preset. As always, guys, these tutorials and videos are supported by my website. Definitely go ahead and check that out over at synthhacker.com, or you can click the link in the description down below to go check that out as well. I currently have a bunch of different preset packs for Serum and other synths as well, if that's your thing. And there's also a mega pack, which is kind of like heavily discounted, which contains all my Serum preset packs in one, with like full demo tracks and all that stuff. So yeah, definitely go ahead and check that out if you get a chance. Like I said, over at synthhacker.com, or click the link in the description down below. But without further ado, let's start making this really cool squelchy trap lead. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure the sound is monophonic. Like I said, that whole kind of like sequence and pitch change and all that stuff is just one note being held down, so we do want it to be mono. And we're just going to be using two oscillators. We're going to be using Oscillator A and also the sub oscillator. If you kind of are just really, for your low end, just heavily leaning on just like the 808 kick or something like that, and you don't need to have like, for this to have any low end, then you don't really need the sub oscillator, but I think it sounded like pretty cool with a bit of low end on it as well. The octave that you set these two really will depend on kind of like the MIDI notes that you input in, but one thing to make sure that you have is that the sub oscillator is just one octave below Oscillator A. That's the main thing to bear in mind. I might as well set up the LFO right at the start. This is a really good point to mention. Like I said, the whole kind of sequence and cool lead sound that you heard was just from one note, and really where this comes from is this LFO, which is just a really powerful way to modulate a lot of different aspects of the sound. And I actually had this LFO set up modulate in 8 different parameters. And one really cool tip to mention is in a lot of these kind of like dubstep and trap presets and tutorials that I see from other people, they kind of got the right idea that you need like a lot of modulation and movement going on for it to be interesting, but some of the kind of like messier presets that don't sound too great, I often find is because they use too many different modulation sources on too many different things. So one tip I can give right off the bat is, if you're using an LFO to modulate the sound and you want it to change a lot, make sure that you stick to generally just 1 or 2 LFOs modulating the sound, because then you get this kind of like consistent movement across the sound, which is really cool. So I'm going to set this up right away. Try and be creative with the LFO, experiment with different sequences, try out your own different stuff. Don't copy this exactly, but just for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to recreate what I did originally. So I had the rate set to 2 bars and set it to trigger so that it starts as soon as the note is pressed. And then what you can do, if you're on PC, you can shift click. I'm assuming, I'm not sure what it is on Mac, it's probably something similar, to create like new nodes that you can move around. So I'm just going to quickly program something in here. 1 second, this might take a while. So I had something like this at the beginning. And you can see these like faint lines in the background. Should give you an idea of where to actually position stuff. Bring this down here. You can just skip this bit if you you know, just want to program your own in, but I'll just quickly do this. I should have probably just saved an LFO really to just load in, but well, nearly done. So then we have that there. And just one more, and then we've got our LFO shape there, which is really cool. That's something similar to what I had anyway. It might be a little bit messy, but you know. So yeah, this, once you've set up like some cool modulation, bear in mind you can also load in preset ones as well. There's some good ones, like decent sequence ones. You can find some cool LFO shapes that people have given away for free online as well, which is really cool. But yeah, we're going to be using this LFO for a bunch of stuff, and one of the things we're going to use it for is actually to control the amplitude of the sound. So we're going to completely ignore the amplitude envelope. And to do this, we're going to drag and drop this onto the level of oscillator A. So now the amplitude of the sound is just responsive to the LFO, which is really cool because it keeps it like consistent with the modulation as well. And then we're also going to use it for the level of our sub oscillator as well. I'm just going to move this up a little bit. And then, yeah, that's the kind of the basis for the sound. So this is, if we listen to it now, is just like a saw wave. But you can hear we've got that like basic movement going on. So what we want to do is obviously make the sound a little bit more interesting. And this is really where you can experiment. Try out, you know, different wavetables and all that good stuff. There's actually like loads of custom ones online that people have made. You know, some people are selling them in like packs as well, like wavetable packs. So that's definitely worth checking out. But for this sound, the one I used was this vocally native curse one. And first of all, I used the LFO to modulate the wavetable position. And then another thing I also did was use it to modulate the warp mode, which I actually picked mirror. This is probably actually one of my favorite warp modes, especially when you start like squeezing it into the middle. You can get some like really nice squelchy sounds. And yeah, I just set up the LFO on that as well. We've got a little bit of movement, and I'll show you what we have now. So you can hear it's got this kind of like nice squelchy, vocally kind of like organic characteristic to it, which is really cool. We'll kind of hear a bit more of that when we use some compression in the effects stage, but I'll get onto that in just a second. Another thing we're going to do is also set up a second LFO. Like I said, you don't typically want to use more than 1 or 2 LFOs, so you have something like nice and consistent. But what I use this LFO for actually was to modulate the pitch over time. Like typically in these like trap drops, you hear like the lead sound or like bass lead sound. It's usually like a hybrid, like either drops or rises in pitch over time, which is a really cool way to like keep it interesting. And you can kind of automate this in your DAW, or you can use an LFO, and the synth is completely up to you really. But yeah, I use an LFO. You can simply just drag and drop this on the coarse pitch, and then you can Alt-Shift-Click, like I said, I'm not sure what it is on Mac, to make sure it's just going one way. And then we want to set this to 12 semitones. So over the period of like 2 bars, what's going to happen is the sound is going to drop in pitch by an octave, which I'll just show you. And that's really kind of where the kind of like pitch movement comes from. Next, we're going to move into the oscillator section. I think I used a dual filter for this. I use a multi-filter, which is the high peak 12 dB filter. And like I said, we're going to use the same LFO on this as well. I brought the cutoff down a little bit and put this on here, on the cutoff modulation, and then I pushed the resonance to full and put the LFO on here as well, and brought this kind of all the way back. And then this frequency control here is where is basically like the peak section of the filter. So like I said, it's like a high pass and a peak filter in one. And I also put the LFO on this as well, just modulating it a little bit. Definitely experiment around with this and experiment like with different filters as well. So now we have this. The resonance peaks in the high pass and the peak section of the filter kind of bring out that squelchiness of the sound, which is really cool. So now we can move into the effects section where the sound really gets polished off. The first thing we're going to do is set up our hyperdimension effect. We're not using the dimension effect, we're just going to use the hyper part, which is kind of like a global unison control, really. And you can drag and drop this onto here as well, so it's just another kind of source of modulation and movement. And what's going to happen is the sound's going to kind of appear wider because of the unison, but it's going to kind of align itself with the modulation, which is really, really cool. So you can hear that makes it sound much thicker. It kind of spreads it across the stereo image a bit, which is really cool. Next, I just added a really little bit of subtle distortion. This won't be too noticeable, but yeah, it's just something I put on there. Next, I actually used a reverb, and I actually put this before the compressor, which is a cool little technique I'll get onto in just a second. Brought the mix amount down a little bit, brought the size down a little bit. Kept the low cut where it is and the high cut and all that stuff. Didn't really get too complex with the reverb. So that'll just give us this sound, which is like a little subtle bit of reverb, but obviously because it's trap you can't have enough reverb. I think that's the rule. And what I did was actually something that I've not done before, and actually put the compressor after the reverb, so that in between when the notes are playing, it kind of like sucks up the reverb and pulls it in between all these little kind of like sequence bits that we've put in the LFO, which is a really, really cool effect, and I'll just show you what this does. So first of all, set it to multiband and boost the gain a bit. Just do this gradually and listen, otherwise you're going to end up blowing your ears off. But yeah, I just kept the release and attack and ratio and threshold and stuff all where that is, and you'll hear the effect that this has now. It kind of like sucks out all the nice characteristics of the sound, like the squelchiness that I mentioned earlier and the reverb in between all the sequence bits, which is really cool. So that's without. So that is just like an insanely cool trick that I like to use on trap leads. Really, really cool. And then finally, I think I just added a little bit of EQing just to take some of the low end out of it, because obviously we have our sub oscillator going direct out for the bass sound. And yeah, that's pretty much the sound, guys. So hopefully you got a lot out of this video. Like I said, the best thing to do with this would be to take everything that you've learned from it and kind of try and experiment a little bit. Like I think a lot of the sounds that you hear in these like really big trap songs, you know, those won't have been intentional sounds. They'll have just been the result of people just kind of like experimenting with like different stuff, and you know, even like external effects and all that stuff and weird modulation. So really just kind of dive in and just like start mucking around. That's the best way to learn, I think, and the best way to create unique sounds as well, rather than having something specific to go for and trying to get that. So yeah, hopefully you learned a lot from this video. If you did, please subscribe to stay up to date with new tutorials that I'm bringing out all the time. If you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to leave them down below. Leave a like on the video if it was useful, and like I said, these videos are supported by my website over at synthhacker.com, or you can click the link in the description down below to go check out my presets for Serum. Definitely appreciate that well in advance if you do decide to purchase that. It really helps support me and the channel. And yeah, that's all from me, guys, so thanks a lot for watching. I really do appreciate it, and I will see you in the next video.